If you all will bear with me this morning, usually I have a number of topics to discuss. This morning, I have only one issue. I'm allotting majority of my time under Chairman's comments this morning to talk to you about something that is very, very concerning to me as well as my fellow commissioners with respect to the latest on offshore drilling that the President has issued a new 5-year plan from 2019 to 2024. I certainly understand where our President is coming from. We need to understand that we need to increase, certainly, oil production and supply in our country. It will certainly help lower the prices. It will certainly create more jobs. And it'll diminish our country's dependency on the OPEC nations with respect to oil production. I certainly understand all of that. That makes quite a bit of sense to me. However, with that being said, late Thursday evening, I got a call from the governor's office to ask me to come to Raleigh this past Saturday morning to participate and meet with local leaders and Secretary Zinke, the Interior Secretary for President Trump. Those present were Governor Cooper, Attorney General John Stein, Secretary Ryan Zinke, U.S. Department of Interior, Downey Mangalinas, Deputy Chief of Staff, Secretary Michael Reagan, North Carolina DEQ, Ken Udy, Governor's Office, Jordan Wichard, Governor's Office, Jeremy Tarr, Governor's Office. Along with myself, Susie Walters, Mayor Pro Tem of Nags Head, former chair, Outer Banks Tourism Division. Renee Cahoon, Commissioner in Nags Head, but also heads the North Carolina Coastal Resources Commission. Tracy Cooper, the Mayor of Atlantic Beach. Rob Zappel, New Hanover County Commissioner. Dr. Stanley Riggs, Marine Geologist, East Carolina University. Tom Keyes, President, Carteret County Chamber of Commerce. And Mr. Dave Tempe, one of our good fishermen, former U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It was quite an honor for me to be there. We started our meeting at 10 a.m. We finished at about 12:30. The Secretary was there to hear our concerns. I've mentioned to you certainly what the President's thoughts are and what his initiatives are. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say how important it was for us to share our concerns with the Secretary. In North Carolina alone, there's $3 billion annually that comes into the state of North Carolina, about 30,000 jobs, of about 300 miles of coast, and 22 barrier islands in the state of North Carolina. Certainly the cons, I can tell you all day long what they are. You know what they are. Expensive facilities, oil spills. We have even a higher energy system of storms from nor'easters to hurricanes that would contribute to adding additional potential spills. High-risk jobs, our food chain problems. The list goes on and on. What I'd like to do is share some facts, and our citizens in Dare County need to know the facts. Folks, this is not a political issue. It's far from a political issue. There are 7 major states, from Maryland to Florida, that the governors have opposed offshore drilling. To make my point clear, it is not political. 4 of those governors are Republicans. 3 of those governors are Democrats. This is about our economy. This is about devastation to our beaches and a livelihood for our folks to live and make a living. Maryland Governor Larry Hogan is totally against. In fact, he has already directed his Attorney General to take legal action if necessary. Virginia Governor Ralph Norton is totally against. He ran on this campaign to be elected governor in Virginia just recently. I've already stated that I met with our governor, and our governor has said the same. If he has to take that action, he will. He will take action to sue. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster's, once again, against. Georgia Governor Norton Deal, he expressed concerns, said he would like to consider the effects on tourism. He is totally leaning against. Florida Governor Scott has already gotten an exemption from the president and from the secretary because they're opposed and they have the same concerns that we here in Dare County and on the Outer Banks have, and that's devastation to our economy and our beaches. And then finally, Phil Murphy of New Jersey, new governor, against. Once again, 4 Republicans, 3 Democratic governors, totally against. It is not a partisan issue. East Coast communities strongly oppose offshore oil and gas drilling and exploration, including seismic testing, air gun blasting. As of January of this year, 144 East Coast municipalities and over 1,200 local, state, and federal elected officials, including our Governor Cooper, have formally opposed offshore drilling and seismic air gun blasting. Numerous fishing and tourism interests, including local chambers of commerce, tourism, the Restaurant Association, and an alliance representing 41,000 businesses and 500,000 fishing families from Florida to Maine oppose offshore drilling. We must stop expanding drilling in new areas like the Atlantic and Arctic Oceans. Atlantic coast communities depend on oil-free beaches, clean, renewable sources of energy like offshore wind would provide far more jobs than oil drilling. Drilling in deeper and more remote waters increases the risk of a spill. No amount of oil is worth the result of a one-time disaster. Where we have drilled, we have spilled. Let me repeat. Where we have drilled, we have spilled. Folks, this is a huge issue for the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Let me give you some additional facts. 17.2 billion, and I say billion, in environmental damages to the Gulf due to the BP spill 7 years ago, 2010, and over $60 billion have been spent on responses and cleanup to pay for the economic claims to oil spilled victims. 87 days it took before the well could be capped, from April 20 to July 15 in 2010, 87 days. 134 million gallons of oil poured into the Gulf of Mexico. Our National Wildlife Federation has stated 3/4 of pregnant bottlenose dolphins in the oil-spilled areas failed to give birth to a viable calf. Between 2 and 3 trillion, and the word is trillion, larva fish and 8.3 billion oysters are estimated to have been lost. Folks, 30% of the oil spilled is thought to still be unaccounted for from the scientists, and it remains submerged on our beaches, and it has taken untold damage to fish and their habitats, depleting their numbers and disrupting the food chain. Dolphins are dying in an unusually high number. Sea turtles are nestings are declining. Tuna develop abnormally now because of these spills. Scientists say the long-term damage affects spawning waters for many fish. Oil is still below the surface on the beaches and in the sand. Oil-soaked mangrove trees on the coast have been damaged to the point to where they protect the lands, and those lands are subsiding. After 5 years of oily beaches, the tourists, just within the last year or so, are starting to trickle back to the coast. Folks, we have a over $1 billion economy on the Outer Banks. If we were to have an oil spill, 1 year would devastate us. We would never come back from an oil spill, as such as the nature of the BP oil spill. Trump administration, under that proposal, is a 5-year plan from 2019 to 2024. Under the proposal, only one of 26 planned areas in the Arctic Ocean, Pacific Ocean, Gulf of Mexico, and Atlantic Ocean would be off limits to oil and gas exploration. According to Interior Secretary Zinke, he said the Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management has identified 47 potential areas where industry companies can buy leases between 2019 and 2024. The Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management, which oversees offshore leases, promises that the environment would be protected. How can they make such a promise?
Right.
How can they make such a promise? They made that promise in the Gulf. Did you see what happened in the Gulf with one spill? There are 10 major states in the United States, Texas being number one, that produce 94% of all onshore U.S. reserves in the United States. And Texas is roughly a third. Texas is number one, Alaska number two, California number three, North Dakota number four, Oklahoma number five, New Mexico number six, Wyoming number seven, Utah number eight, Colorado number 9, Louisiana number 10. Of the nation's 141 operating refineries, 89 of those refineries are located in those 10 states. The national refinery capacity is roughly 16.7 million barrels per day. Folks, we are producing more oil than we can refine. Why do you think we are exporting oil? We're producing more than we can refine. I had some statistics, and I'm trying to find my page, and here it is here now. Since 2014 and 2016, there have 3-year period, there have been 5 refineries built in the United States. Prior to that, from 1975 to 1998, some 23 years, there were only 12 refineries built. Now, folks, you do the math. That's 17 subtracted from 141 refineries. Does that tell you how old our refineries are in the United States of America? They're all in disarray with respects to upgrades that need to be taken place. We don't have enough refineries to refine the oil that we're pumping. There's approximately 1.7 million oil and gas wells in the U.S. The average depth of those are over 6,000 feet. As of January of 2017, as I mentioned earlier, 141 operable petroleum refineries in the U.S. Later in my comments, I'll share with you some information that I shared with Secretary Zinke with respects to why we do not need to drill off our coast. There's a canyon off the coast of Virginia. It's the Norfolk Canyon. There's a canyon off the coast of Maryland, the Washington Canyon. We have 3 canyons in the state of North Carolina: the Keller Canyon, the Hatteras Canyon, the Pamlico Canyons. Most of these are 60 to 70 miles offshore. There's astronomical numbers, and I'll try to relate to you with respects to just recently our beach nourishment projects in Kill Devil Hills, Kitty Hawk, Duck, Southern Shores, was a $40 million project. Now, I might have this number wrong, and I'll ask our finance director and our county manager to correct me if I am, but somewhere between $6 and $8 million of that contract was mobilization cost. That's getting the equipment here and setting it up. Now, what we do with respects to drilling and pumping sand on the beach is we're sucking sand off the bottom of the ocean floor. To drill a well, minimum 6,000 feet, building a platform, I couldn't begin to tell you the cost that it would take to drill one well off our coast. The Secretary himself said in our meeting that he recognized the fact that the oil companies were moving onshore. Well, let me tell you, folks, let me tell you why they're moving onshore. And rather than talk about the pros and cons with the Secretary, because I knew he knew what those were already, I offered some prospective resources and some other alternatives. The United States Geological Survey that was undertaken a number of years ago assessed the fact that there was estimates undiscovered recoverable crude oil onshore of 48.5 billion barrels of oil. Offshore, they estimate between 66 and 115 billion barrels. But that's not off our coast. 45 billion barrels is off the Gulf of Mexico. 38 billion barrels is off Alaska. That leaves the outer continental shelf off our shores of 17 billion. There is no comparison with those numbers compared to what's available onshore in the United States of America. There's oil known as tight oil. It's a form of shale oil. In April of this 2008, the USGS released a report giving new resources assessments in the Balkans, talking about Montana and North Dakota, that there were about 3 to 4 billion barrels in those areas. There's also oil shale. Oil shale. Now listen to this, folks. The United States of America has the largest known deposits of oil shale in the world, according to the Bureau of Land Management, and holds an estimated 2.1 trillion barrels of potentially recoverable oil. Why in the world would we want to drill offshore when our resources onshore are as lucrative as I have just stated? I need to ask you, as a citizen, as elected leaders, as stakeholders in our community, to take advantage of the 60-day comment period, which will end on March the 8th of this year. There are several ways that you can comment. You can submit comments to the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, either online or by mail. Directions for filing a comment online can be found, and we'll provide that with you, but I'll state it here, www.boem.gov/national programs comment. If you can't do it online, you can certainly mail your comments to Mrs. Kelly Hammerle, Hammerle, National OCS Oil and Gas Leasing Program Manager, BOEM, 45600 Woodland Road, Sterling, Virginia, 20166-926. There will be a second meeting hosted by BOEM in North Carolina, and it's scheduled February the 26th in Raleigh at the Hilton North Raleigh in downtown on Wake Forest Drive. I will be there. So please, if you will, take the time to post. To further echo our comments with Secretary Zinke, he fully understood our concerns. We asked him to extend the comment period an additional 60 days. We also asked him to host 3 additional public comment periods on the coast of North Carolina, one being in Kill Devil Hills. He said he would certainly take that under consideration. He reiterated that the President did want to hear from our constituents because he knows how important it is to the citizens of Dare County, Outer Banks, North Carolina, the other coastal states. In summary, I'd like to say that this board was elected to represent the people who live on the Outer Banks. Once again, this is not a Republican or a Democratic issue. This is about people's livelihood. And every single time that I have an opportunity as an elected officer, I will do what the majority of our citizens ask us to do. We're fortunate to live in a paradise, in a pristine area that attracts millions of people every single year to the Outer Banks. We have a lot of history here. We have a lot of cultural attractions, and we certainly have some scenic lighthouses. But our number one attraction and the reason why people come to the Outer Banks and our shoreline is tourism. Tourism is our lifeblood of the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And it all centers around our pristine beaches. Our people, our economy, our children's future all depend on the Atlantic Ocean. I've got 4 grandchildren, and I want them to be able to enjoy what I've been able to enjoy my 71 years of life today. This Dare County Board of Commissioners has reached out numerous times and listened to all sectors of our community. While we support, as I said earlier, the responsible development of our nation's energy supply, we cannot ignore the potential risk of offshore drilling and seismic testing exploration off our coast. The risk would needlessly put our environment and our entire way of life at risk. Our community cannot become the next Prince William Sound or Deepwater Horizon. That is why offshore energy has been opposed by elected officials in towns and counties throughout our county, Chamber of Commerce and Business, our tourism industry on behalf of the millions that visit here yearly, our key stakeholders, fishermen. They're already trying to take their lives away from them. Can you imagine, Commissioner House, what this would do to our fishing industry?
Oh, yeah.
Charter boat operations, surfers, beachgoers. To sum it up, I've said this before, we have all the risk and none of the reward. For these very reasons, I oppose offshore drilling and seismic testing off our coast. I have worked with our clerk to come up with a new resolution to ask this board to take a look at and ask their blessing to see if we can pass. And at this time, I'd like to ask our county manager to read that resolution.
This is a resolution expressing the Dare County Board of Commissioners' continued opposition of offshore drilling and seismic testing. Whereas the Dare County Board of Commissioners has had a long-standing objection to offshore drilling for gas or oil, including exploratory drilling and seismic testing. And whereas in resolutions dated April 6, 2015, December 5, 2005, May 19, 2003, and February 2, 1998, the Dare County Board of Commissioners has consistently expressed its steadfast and unwavering opposition to any offshore drilling or testing. And whereas since then no evidence has been uncovered to demonstrate any benefits to Dare County or to the surrounding region, and it has not been proven that offshore drilling and testing can safely be done without risking harm to the environment, the North Carolina coastline, our property, our businesses, our livelihood, or our quality of life. And whereas the potential damage to North Carolina's beaches and coastlines should a spill occur would be devastating to our natural resources and irrevocably harm Dare County's tourism-based economy. And whereas it is vital that local and state officials throughout North Carolina and its neighboring states take a unified stand in opposition to offshore drilling because a mishap in one jurisdiction could negatively impact the coastal environment and economy of adjacent areas. And whereas other coastal communities and their neighbors have suffered dreadful consequences as the result of offshore energy exploration, including the Prince William Sound, victimized by the Exxon Valdez, and countless Gulf Coast communities harmed by the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. And whereas the documented dangers that are associated with offshore drilling and testing would needlessly put our environment, coastline, beaches, fishing, and tourism industry at risk and threaten our way of life in Dare County, North Carolina. And whereas the risks associated with offshore drilling and testing were fervently conveyed by Dare County Chairman Robert Woodard and other elected officials and stakeholders during a February 3rd, 2018 meeting with North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper and U.S. Department of Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke. Now therefore be it resolved that the Dare County Board of Commissioners renews its staunch opposition of offshore drilling, including exploratory drilling and seismic testing, and urges North Carolina, our neighboring states, and all federal agencies to take no action that would put our coastline at risk. This the 5th day of February, 2018.
I move to be approved.
Thank you, County Manager Alton. I believe I heard a motion by Commissioner Shea and Vice Chairman Overman to approve this resolution as presented. Is there a second to that resolution?
Second.
There's a second by Commissioner Couch and House. The floor is open for further discussion.
I do have one comment. I think we should strike the Exxon Valdez, because Exxon Valdez has nothing to do with offshore drilling. And in fact, it's the transport of oil via shipping off our coastline that probably actually has greater impact. It's all done inside the Gulf Stream, and if there was a wreck out there, it would be ashore. Whereas offshore drilling is outside the Gulf Stream, and the Gulf Stream would somewhat protect us from it. But I don't think the Exxon Valdez stuff should be in there.
Thank you, Commissioner Tobin. Commissioner Count.
Regarding the Exxon Valdez, that was human error, Captain Hazelwood. Appreciate what you have to say, but I disagree. I think it's important. The stats you gave on marine life and the fact that, you know, we're in touch with our marine life. We're talking about dolphins, porpoises, whales, fish, the whole stuff about the billions of larvae that were impacted. I think marine life is probably incorporated in the fifth or sixth one down there where it says put our environment, coastline, beaches, fishing in jeopardy. It's inclusive in that, but I did want to point out that our marine life is important. I support this.
Thank you, Commissioner Couch. Anyone else? Then there's a motion on the floor to accept this resolution as presented. I've not heard a motion, just a suggestion to alter that. So with that being said, this is this resolution as it stands. I would ask a show of hands in support of this resolution. I believe that's unanimous, Mr. Clerk. Those opposed, like sign. Then the motion carries unanimously. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your stance. This is extremely critical to our livelihood and our industry here in North Carolina, and I appreciate your total support of this resolution to forward to our governors and our state and federal legislators, because there is certainly not unanimous support from our state or our federal legislators with respect to being opposed to offshore drilling. So once again, thank you all for your support of this.